Sir Roger Scruton sits alongside the likes of Descartes, Kant and Edmund Burke as one of history's great philosophers. He is regarded as the most important conservative thinker of his generation. He published more than 40 books of unparalleled breadth and depth in religion, philosophy, aesthetics, politics, music, hunting and even wine. His work in keeping the flame of civilization burning behind the Iron Curtain during the Cold War has left such an indelible impression on the country of Hungary that it even has a cafe chain named in his honour. Scruton passed away in January 2020, just weeks before the world was brought to a standstill by the pandemic. And I'm sure that I'm not alone in wondering what he would have made of the cultural revolution that followed. His work continues through the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation. The founder and executive director of that foundation joins me now from the United States, Sir Derderian. Thank you so much for joining us today. So let's begin by telling our audience who may not know very much about Roger, just a potted history of his biography. Where did he come from? You know, he's a working class guy, right. And ended up being one of the greatest minds of his generation.
Yeah. Well, first, I just want to say thank you so much for having me, Emma. It's a pleasure
to
join you in the studio and get to talk about the wonderful work of the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation. So Sir Roger was born, as you said, in a working-class family, I believe, in 1944, and grew up in High Wycombe. So he very much so grew up in that place, in that era. And as he started going through school, realized he had some skills in his academic studies, and ended up getting to go to grammar school and won a scholarship to go to Cambridge at Jesus College, where he studied and actually started out in natural sciences, and I think within the first day decided he liked moral sciences quite better, so switched his major, or what he was reading, and just had a fascinating life from which he then goes and as he's going through his studies, spends some time in Paris, and this is one of the points and stories he always loves to tell about his conservative turn. Before, he had some questions. He agreed with his father, who was very much so a working-class man and proud of his background.
But it was the revolutionary activity of the 1960s that really got him going.
So he was in May 1968, is in Paris, looking down from an attic apartment that he was borrowing from a friend. He always describes this in a lot of his interviews, but looks down on the street and sees the revolutionaries, those that were, fighting for the proletariat, at least in their words and what they presented. But what it really was the bourgeoisie attacking the proletariat. The only real proletariats on the street, as he would say, were the policemen, trying to defend the place. And then otherwise, all these young middle-class students were pulling cobblestones out of the street, throwing them through windows, overturning cars of all the people that they were supposedly for. And his line is always, he looks down and he says, well, whatever they're for, I'm against. And he spent the rest of his life trying to figure out what exactly that was.
So one of the other things he was against was the Soviet Union, and he was very involved in going behind the Iron Curtain to countries like what is now Hungary, Czechia and Poland, and teaching lectures to make sure that the flame of civilization kept burning there.
Right. So in 1979, I believe, he gets invited out to give his first lecture and isn't sure what they're going to want to talk about, so he prepares something on Wittgenstein and the private language argument. And he just realizes they're just so excited to have people from the West come over. And it's this very kind of tense meeting. It's really very much so a secret activity that at any moment, police can break in. And so over the course of the next 10 years, he begins to create institutions and organizations, one in Czechoslovakia, one in Poland. He supports another that pops up in Romania. And through his larger network that he's supporting. And they create this underground university in which they're smuggling in resources, they're bringing in samizdat publications, they're smuggling books, smuggling out essays and articles and different things, and even goes so far as to set up a degree awarding program through the Faculty of Divinity at the University of Cambridge. And I think they actually awarded 3 or 4 degrees through this program, and quite difficult too, as they had to have formal lectures, figure out how they could grade papers and so on and so forth, and take them back and forth. But what was most fascinating is in 1985, he's giving a lecture, and he says he more or less knew this was his last trip, but he's giving a lecture in one of these secret meetings, and the police come in and seize him, throw him down the stairs, rough him up a good bit, and essentially take him to the border. And Barbara Day, in her book, The Velvet Philosopher, describes this scene quite beautifully, or interestingly at least. But they take him to the border, and they just point out into Austria and say leave and never return. And the description is, well, there's this kind of frumpy Englishman just wandering off with his leather bag on his shoulder, and not returning until 1989 when the wall fell.
So you're, through the foundation, you're continuing that legacy. So can you tell us a bit more about, what the work of the foundation is? I know recently I came to see a performance of Roger's opera Anna. Right. You've been doing a series of seminars at Oxford. Tell us a little bit more about how you're continuing his legacy.
Right. So the idea, of course, as you might guess by the name, the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation, is to continue his legacy and to really establish it through the conservation, care, and continuation of humane wisdom and culture. And what this looks like is hosting lectures, hosting performances, hosting seminars and conferences. Like you said, we just hosted the concert premiere for the opera that he'd written the libretto to that was set to music by David Matthews. And we just did this last week, an Oxford seminar where we had 21 undergraduate students from around the West come together for 5 days and go through lectures and experiences, get to go out to Sir Roger's farm and really have that wonderful experience. We're doing a conference in September on the pursuit of beauty for young academics, and really trying to create this international network of people who know Roger, who love Roger, who really engage with his work, and allow this network to build so that people who care about architecture, who care about culture, who care about music and philosophy, politics, really the truth and what makes life worth meaning, can come together around Sir Roger's work and around his name. And do something worthwhile and meaningful.
Well, God bless you for everything you're doing, and good luck with all of it. I am your cheerleader from the sidelines. So that was Fisher Derderian. Thank you so much for joining us from the Roger Scruton Legacy Foundation. Thanks for your time today.